Welcome to What the Tech podcast. I'm your host, Troy Vermillion, and today's show is shaping up to be an interesting one. So get your popcorn ready. Now, today we'll be discussing how leaders can make a company really thrive in a time of crisis. Companies must combine the right technology with the right coaching to effectively mobilize and inspire their staff. And by combining these elements, it allows companies to successfully implement new strategies, manage reductions in force, and reevaluate job requirements and skill sets to effectively ensure that their employees are correctly aligned. The success of a company's strategic initiatives is strongly linked to the effectiveness of its talent optimization initiatives and its leadership. Now, in fact, research actually shows that senior leaders at companies that actually practice systems like predictive index reported that 89% of their strategic initiatives were successful, which is actually 22% higher than the average of 73. So combining the right technology with quality coaching and strategic approaches can help any company adapt and thrive, really regardless of any economic circumstances. So if you're interested in this one, make sure you kick back and listen to What the Tech. All right, so let me tell you why I'm so dang excited. I've been chasing down my next guest for like 6 months to come on the show with me and just hang out. So needless to say, I'm so excited to introduce you all to my next guest and good friend. Now, she's got over 30 years of business executive experience in a variety of different roles. And not only does she have extensive business experience, but she's also passionate about, helping groups, organizations move forward into a place of transformation. Now, she has worn the corporate armor like we all have, and the professional veneer, as she calls it, across many different areas, such as operations, supply chain, IT, and much, much more. And she's actually been helping businesses find their path to achieving solid business goals. And she believes the secret sauce lies in leading with vision, acting with integrity, and empowering those around you. Now, her unique perspective combines her business acumen with serious motivation, which honestly are two essential components for getting people from where they are to where they need to be. So nothing is ever achieved alone, and I'm confident that having a conversation with Debbie Radish-Respess will actually help all of us see and reach our full potential. So Debbie, I'm so excited to have you on the show with me today. Welcome.
Thanks, Troy. I am super excited to just kind of see where this journey is going to take us.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and I'm not lying. She's a busy lady. So, she's like, let me think about it. Let me find some time. We've kind of volleyed back sometimes back and forth, but either way, I've got you now for, an hour. And so we're going to really dig in here. I'm going to pick your brain about some things. But before I do that, I always like to kick off with a little bit of an icebreaker. And so, as I always say, this is really food for our listeners, right? This is something that they want to walk away with some practical things. But I also think that we're all human and like to get to know each other a little bit. So I start off with the icebreaker of eat. And all that means is that I'm going to ask you about an embarrassing moment. I'm going to ask you about some adversity that you went through or encountered in your either personal or professional career, and a truth that you live by. So go ahead, take it from the top.
What's the first one? An embarrassing moment.
Embarrassing moment. Yes.
I'm such a geek. I can give you too many, maybe. Can I tell on myself that I was totally not prepared for our call today?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So not prepared.
So here's one of the things that I learned. You really need to know who your audience is and how they like to communicate. When I get invites in the calendar, I don't always read them because it just isn't top of mind. If it's an email format, totally do it. So I opened up the invite 3 minutes before our conversation today and said, oops, I was supposed to do this, and I was supposed to do this, and I was supposed to do this. And here I am just going to wing it a little bit. So yeah, so there's that.
Well, equally so, I was embarrassed that I didn't send you the link for this show. I actually had the temporary link in there. So I'll fall on the sword too that I didn't get you what you needed. But fortuitously, we're still here and we're going to make it happen. So you know what? Whether we're embarrassed about it or not, let's make it happen.
No,
Yeah,
go ahead. No, well, I was going to say, I'm like, what that does is it just kind of teaches you a little bit to be a little flexible, a little agile, to just kind of go with it, to go, oops, sorry. How do we make sure we get back on track?
Right. That's a good point, because let's be honest, how often do things go exactly as planned?
Not very often.
Never.
I wouldn't say
and if
never.
They do, well, there's got to be, you know what? Where's the fun in that? Where's the fun in just like laying it out? It's going to go this way, and then it always going that way.
I ironically, I'm working on a program about, I'm doing some training next week on expectations, on actually setting expectations. And one of my absolute favorite quotes is, you actually get what you tolerate, not what you expect. And when we're not great at communicating, most humans are not good at communicating. We have all these assumptions that we bring to the table, and then we get really angry because our expectation hasn't been met, and yet we never communicated that expectation. So it's like just kind of a weird thing. So I'll be doing that next week, talking about expectations and assumptions and all that fun stuff that goes around with communication.
Okay, so adversity that you've encountered that has made you a better person, leader, or even in your coaching practice?
I'm actually going to go back. I was a global vice president of HR. That was my last corporate career. And, I think I was part of my own problem. Like, I really recognize that as the leader of the corporate HR team, we had 3,500 employees. Right off the bat, I just noticed that I was really the barrier for success of my team. And my adversity was actually getting out of my own way, like stepping back, sometimes eating that humble pill and going, you know what? I hired people who are better at this, and this. My job is to remove whatever barriers need to be removed so that they can be successful. Right. So my adversity was actually, after 20 some years of being in leadership roles and kind of climbing that ladder, and just thinking I had it all together, and kind of going, in the last 6 years of my career, I'm kind of like, man, I'm kind of part of the problem. That's why I got out of corporate. I'm doing my own consulting, strategy and business, and doing executive coaching. And I'm helping people get out of their own way, like shed that, you brought up the corporate armor, the professional veneer. That's a whole nother podcast probably. But, I just learned to kind of shed that, and I'm helping others really step into being authentic, being who they are in a kind, respectful, loving way, loving themselves first, respecting themselves first. I've never had so much success in anything until I got out of my own way. So that's my adversity story for the day. That kind of popped into my head going, I was kind of it. I was my barrier.
Well, does that by chance lead into the truth that you live by?
I kind of have a lot of truths, but I really do believe in, I'm going to back up for a second. I was asked, what was one thing that you learned from your mom or dad? And the very first thing that popped into my head was kind of just love other people, like just right out of the gate. It doesn't take long to earn my trust or respect. I'm not a proponent of DE&I. I think that you need to just understand what your biases are and give the person a human chance. And I just I'm very accepting of people, and I want you to be authentic, but you need to be respectful in that, especially in the business environment. DE&I is all about, diversity and inclusion and equity and all of the words, all the buzzwords for, I don't know, treat people respectfully. And that's respectfully disagreeing. Like, that's okay. So I have a lot of those conversations on how do you bring that respect to the table in conversations to be able to still problem solve, walk away united, and still get results for the department, for the organization, for yourself, for your family, whatever that kind of looks like, right? So I think I answered that in a really long roundabout way, but I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, love others first is what I heard, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you put people that way, in that perspective, then the respect and all the other things that come with it are kind of an automatic, because to love somebody is to put them ahead of yourself.
Right.
That's what marriage should look like. That's what relationships should look like, and that can be hard in the business world. Especially when you have competing views, as you kind of hinted to with, I just with DEI or whatever it is. Sometimes there can be competing things going on there, and that doesn't mean that you can't still love that person,
right?
In a way that says, "I affirm you and I affirm what you believe. It's just not the way I see things," and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Freedom of opinion and thought is what makes us human.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Servant leadership.
I it's really good.
Servant leadership is what I think I always fall back on when I think about what is the most important thing. When I can tell I am serving, things are working really well. Teams are working really well together. When I'm not serving and when I'm putting myself first, I can see the tension, I can feel the tension, and I can see that the results aren't getting there. So servant leadership is one of those old words. A lot of executives don't believe it. They think that they have to be weak to be a servant, and that's not it. I'm able to help them get over that limiting belief of servantship doesn't mean that you're a weakling and that you don't matter. So
yeah, no, that's a good way to put it, and I definitely think that your innate value has nothing to do with your business, anyways. Like you kind of bring your innate value with you within that, and I think that that's a good way to put it. And I'm a big fan of servant leadership, so I think we're on the same page there. And it leads me to kind of the topic that we were going to talk about today. And thinking about, there's so much going on right now. You think about the economic downturn, you think about, the way the workplace is changing, remote work, work-life balance, the expectation that, employees have of their employer to kind of, do certain things that, were unheard of a decade ago, and so forth. And so we talked about this idea of resilience, being something that people need to have, that probably needs to be taught in today's, age, especially to the younger generation who, I think need to hear it for their own benefit, right? And then, how, technology might play a part in that, and creating a flourishing environment for businesses today. And I know that's a lot, but, I was curious from your perspective, what kind of, strategies are you talking about with your clients right now? And would you suggest that people focus on to remain resilient during economic uncertainty? And really what I think will be, if not a large crisis, at least some amount of a crisis for many businesses.
Boy, that was a lot, Troy. So let me kind of try to answer that in a way that businesses have to have a strategy. Like you've got to kind of know where you're going. I really jumped into strategy again in my last corporate job, where I was like, I need to really know what my next 3 to 5 years looks like and feels like. Need to make sure that it's aligned with that I am building in agility, and all of those things under the umbrella of strategy. So finance and budget and supply chain, and just taking all of that into consideration. When I look at resiliency, a lot of people associate like you're strong to be able to get through that. I think it's actually having a plan of attack to move forward through it. Not, oh, well, I'm super strong and I can just kind of muscle my way through that adversity or that conflict or a recession or whatever, right? It's what's my plan? Where am I going to go? What am I looking to do? Do I have my eggs all in one basket, or have I, am I agile enough to be able to realign? A lot of businesses closed during COVID because they didn't build any agility. They were just staunch, this is my product or this is my service and I'm not moving. And then you had others that absolutely killed it in revenue and everything else and growth and acquisitions, because they were able to pick their head up and go, wait a minute, the landscape has changed. My environment has changed. How do I need to approach this? And how do I need to go into this smart, with my head up, with my eyes out, with my heart, that I'm not losing who I am or what I believe in through that process. So, resiliency is super huge in any business. And it also means, I know that you talk about tech on your podcast, having the right technology to help maneuver through some of that is key. You don't want to have too much or too little. You don't want to, if you're an entrepreneur, I fell into the trap, I love all the shiny objects. Hey, let me try that. Let me try that. Let me try that. I didn't have a strategy when I first started out. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't have a strategy. Right. So I literally sat down and I'm like, what does my 1 year strategy look like? And then I'm going to break this down into 12-week chunks. What does this look like? What are my milestones? Because now I can plan each milestone, and I'm not going to wait till the end of the year and go, well, I didn't get any of my initiatives because I didn't keep a focus on them. Not at all. Like, you've got to be strategic in executing on all that. Resiliency has to be built into that. Dealing with the right people, having the right mindset, all of the soft skills. I'm a big soft person. I'm a people person. I'm a people strategist. I know how to tie the revenue, profitability, recurring revenue. How do you get recurring revenue so that you can actually stop working so long, right? Like, these are some of the things that I focus on, but it's also bringing your whole self to the table. Whether, here, welcome to my cabin, right? I'm talking to you from my loft in my beautiful log cabin that my husband and I own, walking literally from the bedroom to my desk. Life doesn't stop because I walk through a threshold. Whether I'm going into an office or not, it's all intertwined. And how am I setting myself up for that success? With a strategy. You talked about marriage. You got to have kind of a strategy in marriage too, right? It's not just, I'm going to just wing it. That's not how you're successful. That's not how it works.
Well, that's almost guaranteeing failure.
From what I've seen, yep.
When you just wing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you just look at the statistics, and anything, worth doing is worth, working on, right, or working at. And sometimes, we look at our children as projects like that, like our kids are everything. And then, and then our business or work or, our marriage or whatever it is. But anything worth doing is worth doing right. And, in order for you to do it right, I would argue you need a good strategy, whether it's, a 12-week kind of program to implement the things that are going to get you from here to your goals, or you could look at it as your 3 to 5 year plan or whatever. But like, what action steps are you making and taking towards that? I was curious. You mentioned the technology component of it, and you're kind of assessing more than just the people side of things. You're an executive coach across all business operations. I'm curious what as things tighten up. Organizations are certainly laying off a lot of people. You're seeing a lot of that. It's not necessarily the technical talent per se, in and around tech businesses and so forth, but it's a lot of those supplementary, divisions. Like, I mean, if you're not trying to recruit people, I've seen recruiters, in these companies start to see the door, and business development. I've seen actually quite a bit of that. Some of the what they would maybe argue are non-essential, but what kind of technologies are going to be like core to their success? Is it going to be the big ones, like an ERP, or is it going to be, They're people related systems? Do you feel like during an economic downturn, there's a need to invest in the right systems? Maybe that's a good time to do it, or to just evaluate kind of where you're at and what systems you don't need? Like, what's your perspective on that?
When I have conversations with clients, we talk about their technology. What do you have? Why do you have it? What's the purpose? How often do you use it? You're looking at it as a line item, and it should be multiple. If you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 different technologies that you're utilizing, understanding what is the cost benefit, right? Are you actually utilizing it? When I think about strategy, the question is why? Okay, why do you need technology? What is it doing for your company? What is it doing for your people? So I use different technology solutions depending on what the client is looking for. I am a firm believer in talent management, in truly finding what drives people to do what they do, their motivations, and getting like sometimes the right technology in place that actually integrates and aligns to a strategy. So you've got, if my strategy is to build revenue and I need a bunch of salespeople, but I only have engineers who sit at a desk and draw CAD all day. Okay, I have a massive disconnect in what my business strategy is to what my people are capable of doing, right? I think technology is really important when you're looking at, again, that's part of the strategy is what do you need? Why do you need it? What do you not need? What can you take off the table? I think people get so ingrained in some things that they don't sit down and recognize, is this even working for me anymore? Especially entrepreneurs and business owners. It's like, oh, well, we've had it for so long, we just keep it. Why are you not reevaluating the benefits of it or the cost of it, or you're just sinking money into it and no one's really utilizing it? I had a conversation this morning with a client who, they're looking at like 10 different software programs. It's a medical company. They have nurses and whatnot, and their communication across all of their business units is lacking. What they were sold doesn't even fit what their pain is, right? So it's really diving deep to go, what is the purpose of this? And if it doesn't fit that, stop it. Like, just stop it, right? Just stop it. Stop it. It's kind of like the same. I feel the same way with meetings. I feel the same way with reports. Like, what happens if you just don't have a report? Who's going to scream the loudest? Oh, nobody screamed? What a waste of your time, right? And meetings, why are they scheduled for an hour long? Because that's what we're programmed to do. We're just programmed to use what we have, and we don't sit back and look at it in a bigger perspective. That's what I bring to the table. That's what I love to do. Is I love asking well, why do you do that? What does that do for you? What if you didn't have it? What if there was something better, right? I mean, it's just asking those kind of questions that we just don't always ask ourselves. And that's kind of, that's part of the conversations, and then it goes into the people. Do you have the right people in place? I revamped my entire corporate HR team because we didn't have what I walked into and what we had. There was no match, like none. It was like, we're not even not even the puzzle pieces don't match, but we're not even the same like continent right now. Like, it was that big of a mismatch. And I'm like, no wonder why you're not getting any results, right? I mean, so you've got to understand what people are capable of doing, what drives them, what just, and it is a match. You can't just haphazardly, in my opinion, you don't just haphazardly release people without kind of doing that deep dive of who's bringing the right value to the organization for long-term success.
Something tells me you like to break things, Debbie.
Kinda.
Go in and break them so that you can fix them, right? Because the argument would be that they're broken already. There's a disconnect. They're not being used. It's a waste of time and resources. But until they're somebody can come in and put eyes on those things from the perspective of maybe seeing how other businesses are doing it, more efficiently. I do think it's hard for leaders to see, like, their baby sometimes is ugly. I don't mean to put it in such harsh terms, but sometimes the way that they've been doing things isn't the way that is going to help them, thrive, especially in an economic downturn or when things aren't going well. And so I love the way that you're kind of approaching that of, not just evaluating what do you need, but what don't you need?
Well, so Troy, it comes back to like that little servant leadership and being a little humble. Cause we all get tied to our own ideas and what we've brought to the table from the past. That doesn't always work for the current and the future. And it's okay to go, you know what, that served me really well for that period of time. What adjustment can I make now? What is something new and different and better than what I've had? But there's a little humbleness that comes with that to go, wait, my idea from 2 years ago, 18 months ago, 10 years ago isn't still good? No, it's not. And that's okay.
It's not relevant anymore. Yeah.
And it's not like it's wrong or bad. It's just, again, you want to talk about resiliency, right? You can't be resilient with, people grow, things change, the economics change, the work environment, the business environment. My gosh, look at how many people literally got to working in the office full time to 100% virtual in a week, a couple days. Like, it was an instantaneous. We're capable of so much more. I love seeing that potential and then helping those leaders see it and go, oh, now that's exciting. Now I can, right? Like that's where the excitement comes in.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, it kind of takes me down this path of thinking, with kind of where things have gone over the last, few years with COVID happening and the remote work and hybrid and like, do we go back to the office? Do we not? So I was curious, with your background in people operations, how do you recommend organizations move forward as they try to foster team cohesion, really amidst both the challenging economic environment, but really the new work environment?
I think it starts with really defining where you're going. Where do I want to be maybe at the end of December 2023? Back that up and say, where do I want to be in July 1st of this year, right? I mean, I think sometimes we get so caught up in the future that we fail to recognize what are some of the steps that we can take right now. It is having some hard conversations. It is being able to look in the mirror and go, okay, what can I do differently? What can we do differently as a team? Again, I use a lot of different technologies. I specifically use a people strategy that aligns with a business strategy software program. I'm not sure if I can talk about it or not, but
you can talk about whatever you want.
Yeah.
This is my podcast.
Okay. Well, all right. So I'm certified in Predictive Index. And it's one of my favorite tools because not only can we identify how an individual operates, but how the team operates, and we can determine how that aligns with the actual business strategy. So if you have a very innovative business, but you have a lot of people who are totally process driven, boy, that's a big disconnect, right? How do you get them out of that zone of process? It's really hard. Not to say that they can't do it. We can stretch ourselves for a period of time, right? So it's really ensuring that you are aligning the right skill sets, capabilities, abilities, the right mindsets with the right direction for the company. I mean, I completely realigned my business when COVID hit. I lost a massive client during that time. Hey, it happens. You know, I sat back and said, okay, where's the biggest need right now? How do I realign that? I worked with a distillery that literally stopped making alcoholic beverages and made the hand sanitizer. Like they just totally revamped.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was an unbelievable, profitable process for them. But it was having the hard conversation to go, I know that you're awesome at making this type of alcoholic beverage. That's not what's needed right now. Everybody needs the hand sanitizer stuff, right? So can you do that? Can your engineers like redo and use your vats and do something different? That's exactly what they did. You know, and now they're back to making, and I mean, it kept them in business. It was very, very profitable. They were able to actually do things a little differently when they came out of that phase. You want to talk about resiliency, right? They hit it head on, and they were like, man, what else is out there that I can focus on? And I think that we get so caught up sometimes, Troy, in the, you know, everybody's saying recession. What's the knee-jerk reaction? Cut heads, cut heads, cut heads, cut heads, lay off, lay off, lay off.
And we're seeing it.
Yeah. Is that really?
175,000 at this point. 175,000. That's painful.
Yeah. You know, because I'm PI certified, I get all of their, you know, I'm like a little sponge, like with all their data and everything else. And they had I think it was back in 21, they said senior leaders at companies that actually practice talent optimization. So that's actually finding out how your individuals and teams work in the best capacity. They reported that they had that 89% of their strategic initiatives were successful, compared to only 73% of people or companies that don't focus on talent optimization, of actually utilizing and getting their people. Can you imagine if all your folks like were in their zone of genius 75% of the time, 80% of the time, 90% of the time? Can you imagine what productivity and quality, that it goes through the roof. That is that alignment. That is when you're doing it right.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that, like in recent clients where you've kind of seen that uptick? I ask because, like, I think the challenge for people are like, well, go back to what you said before. We've always done it this way and it's worked for us, but that, you know, I think with some of the older industries, especially, that can be a real task to get people who did it a certain way and were successful to you know, change the direction of the Titanic before it's really too late.
Yeah. So I've got a client, 20 years in business. They do residential construction, and you know, a lot of their folks, and let me just use their office folks. So we did a strategy meeting last year, talked a lot. Supply chain is a huge issue, right? I mean, it's just massive. And the supply chain team has been doing the same thing that they've been doing for the last, I don't know, 5, 8, 10, 20 years, you know. They've made a couple of small changes. And the question I asked the leader of that was, hey, have you been out in the field to see how the supply chain is impacting the guys who are building the homes? And he's like, no, right? And I'm like, what if you do that? He did it. We had a coaching call and he's like, hey, I just got to share with you this little success story. Like, I totally went out there. I had a little agenda. It was not just to ride along. We literally talked about some of the complaints that he was hearing. And he says, I got to see it from a different perspective. And he says, now I'm going to have my entire team go and spend a couple of days this first quarter of 2023. Because I want them to be able to see things differently. Because I think what'll happen is I came back as the leader with completely different ideas that I absolutely never would have been able to get to sitting at my desk, crunching my numbers and doing what I normally do. And he's phenomenal at it. But he got to lift his head up and do something completely out of the norm. He's not a super big people person. He doesn't like to spend time with people. He loves to spend time in his office with his door closed, and that's fine. And that's his zone of genius, right? But he got to do that, and relationships got improved tremendously between him and the field. He got to see things from a different perspective and hear the challenges, and not in a complaining way, but to actually kind of put hands on it, right? So think about how he is now approaching the supply chain, how he's having conversations with his vendors, how he is building different lines of communication that are having significant impact, not just internally with the guys in the field, but within his team, how that impacts the other departments, and with the vendors. So he's even having better relationship building conversations with the vendors. So when we talk about strategic initiatives, hey, we don't want to have, we don't want wrong purchase orders. We want to make sure that we do things accurately. We want to make sure that our field guys aren't having to completely revamp an entire process or what we're doing because we got it wrong. Man, we've learned some ways to do it right up front. We're going to absolutely be able to hit some of our strategic initiatives, and they're financial, their number of extra purchase orders. They are relationships. Like, hey, they're not calling me complaining. They're actually now bringing solutions to the table, which has never happened before. And it's all because of a question of, what if you go and spend a day or two out in the field with somebody? Really?
Right. To kind of a day in their shoes sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, was the purpose to figure out the supply chain thing? It could be like, I've got people standing around on the work site that aren't doing anything, and that's obviously costing me money. Was it to reframe what their processes looks like? Like, I'm hearing that there was some sort of epiphany when they did that, but like, what was it specifically for this group? Because it sounds to me like whatever feedback he got from the boots on the ground doing the work allowed him or his team on the supply chain side to actually implement change.
It was actually financial. They track the percentage of accuracy with purchase orders, right? So if I need 5 of these, 5 of those, 5 of those, right? But I have extra purchase orders that get put in because they really needed 8, 8, and 8, not 5, 5, and 5. Well, those numbers they're driving profitability because all of that is not budgeted. It's coming in. So there's financial implications for doing things right or wrong. But if you don't understand what is causing some of that, you're never going to be able to get to root cause. The other thing that we recognized was that they were actually not budgeting at all for extra purchase orders. So that literally was hitting bottom line. So it wasn't just like, hey, we know that we're going to have, I mean, it's home building. You're going to have sometimes theft, or you're going to have too much or too little of something. Something is a little bit wrong, whatever, right? It's not an exact science. So there was a financial implication to getting it wrong. So now they have better processes in place. They have a line item for what they want to budget for. We know we're going to have some type of a gap between what we want to budget versus what we know is what it's going to cost. So we need to budget something in there so that we can have some factual numbers here, and we're not just hitting bottom line to go, oh, well, we had, $1 million or $100,000 or whatever that number is. So it was a financially driven kind of decision, but there was so much more that came out of it.
And did they implement it, like, any outside of process? Did they implement anything from a technology standpoint, or was it really just kind of looking at their business and really assessing the facts? And it sounds to me like there was obviously a disconnect between the home base and the people actually doing the work.
So we did predictive index for them, and what we did was we recognized how this particular leader likes to operate with people, or not. It's really a not, okay. So he and I actually worked on what does a day in the life in a truck with the field guys look like for someone like you who likes to sit behind the desk. So we had data on how this particular leader operates, where they like to play, what is a super big stretch. We knew that we couldn't send him out for a week at a time. Like that would absolutely kill him, because he's like, no, I don't want to be around people that much. Like that would kill me, right? So we designed an actual agenda. So because he's a little more process driven, results driven. Relationships are great, but not always the first that comes to mind. He says what's on his mind. He doesn't kind of care about what you think. He wants to know the facts. So he's very fact and data driven. So being able to understand how he operates actually helped us design and devise the agenda and kind of the script of him going out there and being able to have really impactful conversations, helping him listen differently, helping him communicate differently. So yes, I mean, we use PI as kind of a launching. We used it not only for their strategy, for the business strategy, but then we looked at how their people aligned with that, and then what they needed to do as leaders, because it was the executive team. You know, what do they need to do as leaders to sometimes adjust? And leaders should be adjusting more than staff. That doesn't always happen, because sometimes leaders put their feet in and it's like, this is just who I am and this is how I am. That's not servant leadership. So let's talk.
Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like, you know, to know thyself is really to understand like where there might be opportunities. Predictive index is one of those opportunities, right? Did the whole organization do it, or did you just focus on leadership?
In this case, we only focused on leadership. Part of the strategy for this year is that we are looking at how to utilize that technology throughout the company. No decisions have been made yet, but because we're currently focusing on leadership skills, that was the right place to start. So, you know, you don't have to do all or nothing. Like it can be in, you know, most technology, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can look at it and go, again, what is my purpose for this? What do I want to utilize it for? How do I get the biggest ROI out of it? And then decide, what do I want to do now going forward?
Yeah. Good points. So one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, just, you know, because you are remote and you're doing a lot of the coaching that you do remotely, right? And I think that whether it's HR leaders or, you know, direct, you know, managers, team leaders, things like that, a lot of this is virtually today as well. So I was curious if you have any thoughts around and suggestions when you're kind of having these high profile conversations with people, when you need, you know, certain things to happen, you're providing, you know, valuable feedback, and, you know, and emotions may be running high in some of those situations. I'm curious how Debbie handles these sorts of things, because I'm sure that your clients, you know, these business owners and executives are very passionate about their business. It's almost like a second child, you know, in some ways. And I'm sure it can be incredibly emotional when they're talking to you about, you know, the things that aren't going right and the things that maybe they're upset about. So I'm just curious, how do you kind of volley some of that in, you know, your day-to-day interactions?
I love passion because that shows that it really matters.
Yeah.
What you got to get to is, what are you passionate about? You know, it's the onion analogy, right? You got to peel back the onions to go, what is truly the root cause of that emotional reaction? You know, I'm huge on definitions. So, you know, you either respond or you react. I react when a deer runs out in front of my car, right? Because I'm slamming on the brakes. That's a reaction. That's why we say knee-jerk reaction. But I can respond by pausing and considering how I want to now engage in the situation. Do I want to say something? Do I not want to say something? If I want to say something, what does that mean? What does it sound like? Let's go back to marriage, right? How often do we just spout off because it's a safe place to just be a jerk? as opposed to really considering our words, right? Business is no different. It's really, when someone gets very passionate, when they're very angry, I have people sometimes cry. I do work in the HR field. I work with a lot of HR executives. The pressure that leaders are feeling and not having an outside resource to kind of help them through that, it's prevalent. It pains me, which is why I do what I do. But I want to ensure that, I'm going to listen to what's going on. And then we're going to start asking questions. Okay, what's causing this? Is this a camel that, or the straw that broke the camel's back? Or is this a first time occurrence? Is this what's the situation? Where are you with your mindset? Where are you with your mood? Okay, moods and emotions play a lot with it, right? It's really breaking all that down. What's going on in the business? Hey, we lost a big client yesterday. Oh, okay. Well, we got to talk about that. Like you got angry at Joe. Well, it's not Joe. You're angry because you lost the client. Let's talk about that, right? So it's really getting to the root cause so that you can, again, this is where strategy comes into play to go, how is this impacting the longer term, the steps that are getting us to that longer term initiative, to that milestone? Sometimes it's just, man, you're just having a bad day. Okay, let's just acknowledge that. Give yourself permission to have a bad day. How are you going to get over that? Do you need to go take a walk? Do you need to hit a punching bag? Do you need to get on the elliptical? What do you got to do to kind of get through that? Because sometimes truly it really is I'm just in a crappy mood today. I woke up, my word's poopy. I just woke up poopy, right? Okay.
Poopy, huh?
Just poopy. But what that means is then, as opposed to the serious things that now you really need to go, let's talk about, again, bringing it back home to strategy, bringing it back home to the initiatives, bringing it back home to the things that are moving your business forward so that you can work through it.
Yeah. So I read a survey the other day. It was a survey of nearly 6,000 people. It was like 5,900 and something, about the number one kind of wellness thing that we're seeing. And look, leaders, whether they're, a CXO or they're, a business owner or whatever, they've got to be feeling this too. But the number one thing that people are feeling is burnout right now. Just burnout in general. And you see that in some of the, the turnover, the excess turnover we're seeing within companies and things like that. I'm curious, how do you balance this feeling of resilience and the necessity of being resilient and the simple fact that we all feel overworked? And trust me, I feel that way at times as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to definitions. Are you really burnt out or are you overwhelmed? Because there is a difference. Burnt out, there's, being overwhelmed is, I just really have a lot of stuff on my plate, and maybe I've just kind of lack the focus, and I maybe even lack the discipline of being able to kind of prioritize. So I help clients with that, with going, let's talk about, what does overwhelm mean to you? What does burnout mean to you? Burnout is, you are completely disengaged. Your personality has changed. You are not wanting to get up in the morning. You struggle with everything. Okay. So it is a true, almost like you've just metamorphosized into something totally outside of who you really are and how you really operate. Okay. So I think that it's really important to understand the difference between burnout and overwhelm. Most of my clients are actually overwhelmed. They're not burned out yet. They might be getting close, but they're not yet, they're not quite there. So then it's a matter, again, coming back to strategy, being very intentional with what you're doing and how you're doing it, so that you can lessen the pressure of all of those competing demands, and being very, very intentional with, if I have 42 competing demands, I'm not going to be successful in any of them. I can't work on 42 different things. My strategy needs to be, I'm going to work on these top 2 or 3 things. And when those are accomplished, I can now open up space to work on the next stuff.
Wow. Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing it home, because I really think that gets to the root of many of the things we're seeing and feeling across all levels of business, regardless of your position or title or whatnot. And so I always like to kind of bring it home with a question that I think really hits home for me when I think about it and I reflect on it. But what's the best piece of advice that Debbie would offer a younger version of yourself if you were to say, hey, I know I'm going to be here in this consulting role. I'm going to be coaching business owners, on how to kind of lead through adversity, to be resilient, to think strategically about the things that they're doing. Like, what piece of advice would you give to a younger Debbie?
Oh my gosh. What book do I want to grab, right? Honestly, part of it is, I have a couple of things. I really wish I would have paused more and really thought about where I wanted to go. I can sometimes fall too quickly and easily into the here and now, and that impacts where I really want to go. So do I want to retire when I'm 50? Do I want to retire when I'm 62? And what does that look like? Now, what are the steps that I need to take to help me get to that longer milestone, right? That vision goal of where I want to be. I didn't really do that. My career was I kind of winged it. Like, I was really good at this, so I got into it. And I just didn't have a really good plan. When I think about business owners, when I think about executives, when I think about entrepreneurs, like, I'm an entrepreneur now, which I never thought possible at my age and after 30 years of corporate America, like that, like never crossed my mind. And I wish I would have gotten a really good coach, someone who would walk alongside me, help me figure out things, help me stay focused, help me really identify where is my passion, who do I want to serve, why do I want to do it, what am I really good at, how do I outsource what I don't need to be doing, right? So I love the E-Myth Revisited, one of my favorite books, because, oh my gosh, technology manager, entrepreneur, they are not the same. I think that younger version is just, where do you really want to be? Let's just start with that, and then identify what are some of the milestones that will help you get there. And that helps you build in resilience, right? Because if you, like, I can't have kids. I never had children. So when I was 20, my 20-year-old would have said, yeah, I'm going to be married with kids. I'm going to have the white picket fence. That was that dream at that time, right? That never happened. Okay. What's the new dream? And how do I build in resiliency? Because I didn't fail. I didn't fail because I didn't reach that. All that means is that something changed in my life and I'm able to realign and readjust. I'm going to give you this is one of my favorite stories of all times. It's the buffalo story. And you want to talk about resiliency and just putting your head down and going forward, taking those steps. All other pack animals, when they know a storm is coming, they typically will run the other way. If you ever look at cows in a field and they're laying down, typically it means because there's rain coming and they want a dry spot, so they just lay down, right? Buffalo actually see the storm coming, and they, as a pack herd, will go toward it. What they're doing is they're going to hit the hard stuff right off the bat, and they're going to get through it faster than running away from it and having it nip you at the heels. Resiliency is about seeing that storm coming, being able to go, I'm going to make this plan of attack and I'm going to hit this head on. And I'm going to be intentional and strong in how I'm going to approach it. I'm going to be the buffalo instead of being the deer or anything else that's running away from it, so that I can actually get through it quicker and come out pretty good.
Right. It's a good point that you make. And I don't know if you know much about CrossFit, but Ben Bergeron is somebody that I follow, and they've got all this messaging around into the storm, and they talk about the buffalo, right, walking into the storm, because it's and they do it as a herd, right, and they stay close to each other, and they walk through it, and they get through it really quickly in comparison to anybody else who's kind of, you're in the storm for much longer because you're hunkered down, and so forth. So that's a great analogy, and I'm glad you brought it up. It's a really good one. So I always like to ask, for the sake of my listeners. And first of all, thank you for coming on here, Debbie. This has really been wonderful. But where can people find you if they want to connect with, follow, and actually read some of your fantastic blogs?
Thank you. InvisibleHorizonsCoaching.com will take you to the website. They can reach out to me directly, Debbie at InvisibleHorizonsCoaching.com. Hook me up on LinkedIn. I love connecting. I typically say yes to probably more than I should on LinkedIn, but I love connections. I love following people. I love people following me. That's where they can go and find a lot of my posts. I'm really active on LinkedIn. So those are the three three areas. So website, again, InvisibleHorizonsCoaching.com. And that's Debbie at InvisibleHorizonsCoaching.com. So it's all good.
Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate that. And if you enjoyed the conversation and all the words of wisdom that Debbie had, I hope you will boop that like button and make sure you subscribe so you never miss a episode of What the Tech. And I'm sure at some point we'll have Debbie on here again. She can give us an update on something else she's working on, because she's got a lot of good stuff. So again, Debbie, thank you so much for coming on here. And thanks for listening to the What the Tech podcast.
Thanks, Troy.
Take care.